From the insane clash at UFC 284 that had everyone on the edge of their seats to the controversial aftermath and the quest for a rematch, here's why Alexander Volkanovski called out Islam. An epic fight took place in Perth, Australia, and trust me, everyone was hyped. It went down between Alex Volkanovski, the featherweight and pound-for-pound Aussie champ, and Islam Makhachev, the UFC lightweight champ and Khabib Nurmagomedov protege. Islam won the lightweight title by submitting Charles Oliveira in the first round, marking the return of UFC to Australia since 2019. He then fought against Alex, giving the fans one of the most epic fights of all. One that had everyone rewinding it on repeat. Alex, known as the underdog of UFC, had an impressive 12-fight win streak and remained undefeated for over a decade. He defended his featherweight title 4 times and won 5 title fights, which is the second most in the division. On the flip side, Islam's on a 12-fight win streak and holds the record for consecutive finishes in the UFC. He has the highest significant strike rate and takedown accuracy in lightweight history. So you can only imagine the insane fight that took place. In the first round, both fighters showed great sportsmanship and got into their stances. Alex came out quick and enthusiastic, while Islam remained calm. Volk tried to be aggressive, but Islam defended well and even attempted a neck crank. The round ended with Islam dominating. In the second round, Alex looked confident, but Islam landed some good shots and scored takedowns. Both fighters had their moments, but Islam had the upper hand. Entering the third round, the Dagestani fighter remained composed and continued to attack while Volkanovski tried to defend. They exchanged strikes, and 2 judges scored the round for Islam, while 1 gave it to Alex. In the fourth round, it was clear that Islam had done more damage since he controlled the distance and kept Alex at bay. Alex tried to fight back, but he was struggling. Alex scored takedowns and maintained control, and heading into the final round, the featherweight champ needed a knockout or submission to win the fight. But Makhachev kept landing powerful shots. Volk had a good moment with a takedown, but time was running out. The fight ended with Islam winning by unanimous decision, and in the lead up to the big fight, both Volkanovski and Makhachev were total pros. Not playing into the trash talk game, they surprised everyone by actually touching gloves before the match, which was kinda nice, you know? It showed respect and sportsmanship. And at the start of each round, they kept up the trend, giving each other a bro hug and touching gloves again. When it came down to the decision, both fighters looked hopeful, thinking they had it in the bag. Islam won, but Alex, being the sportsman that he is, clapped and congratulated his opponent even though some fans were still arguing about who really won. During his victory speech, the crowd at Perth's RAC Arena booed Islam, but Volkanovski tried to calm them down. He even asked for a round of applause for Makhachev. But the rowdy Aussie crowd was so hyped up they didn't catch on. Even though he didn't come out on top by a tiny margin, the pound-for-pound Aussie champ won the hearts of millions worldwide. He showed fans what it means to be a true champion, with his sportsmanship and down-to-earth attitude. But even though the two were respectful that day, it was soon very clear that Alexander wasn't happy about it, and he let the world know. He said that he thought he'd won rounds 2, 3, and 5 and couldn't believe he didn't get his hand raised. He even appeared on a YouTube show, totally fired up, expressing his disappointment about not getting the win, and claimed that the judges had robbed him of his big moment. He referred to them as those bees. Alexander didn't outright accuse Islam of cheating, but he dropped a sneaky comment saying that Islam seemed heavier than him, hinting that he might have had some extra help with IV drips. But things took a turn. When New Zealand's UFC star Dan Hooker jumped into the mix, he went on a Twitter rampage, calling Islam a dumb C, and suggesting that he'd hired a nurse to hook him up with fluids. That's some serious trash talking. Dan said that if Islam thought he could fly to Australia, get a nurse to give him an IV, and no one would find out, well, guess what? Dan knows he's a cheating dog. But I gotta be fair here. There's no hard evidence that Islam did anything wrong, or that Dan's accusations are true, but Makhachev had some things to say too. A video popped up on Reddit where Islam spilled the beans on Alex. He said that if there's a chance for a rematch with Volkanovski, he's totally down for it. And even claimed it would be a cakewalk. But man, the fans ain't buying it. They got mixed feelings about Makhachev's words. Because, come on, Alex is a tough opponent. Some fans are even saying that Volkanovski already won his previous fight, so he'd probably come out on top again in a rematch. So they appreciate Islam's confidence, but they're questioning if he can really take Volkanovski down easily, or if he's gonna struggle in their potential rematch. What's even more surprising is how Makhachev may have won the fight against Volkanovski at UFC 284, but he still couldn't beat him in the rankings. The latest pound-for-pound rankings still have Volkanovski sitting above Makhachev, but it's not that surprising considering the whole pound-for-pound concept. It's about who would be best if everyone was the same size. Let's be real, Volkanovski's smaller than Makhachev, but still gave him a run for his money in their fight. So you could argue that if they were the same size, the great Volkanovski would have come out on top. But hey, people are arguing about all sorts of things, with some fans believing that Alex should have won the 4th round. I guess you can argue anything if you want to. But still, it's kind of frustrating when the rankings don't seem to align with the actual fight results. And let me tell you, this isn't the first time the rankings have pulled some strange moves. Even though the rankings have put Alex on top, he still wants a rematch, saying that if Islam was just a featherweight like him, he'd squash him. Easy peasy. He doesn't care how big Islam gets or what he does with those IVs, he just wants everyone to watch what happens next time they fight. Makhachev, though, isn't surprised that he's still sitting at number 2 on the UFC's pound-for-pound rankings. The guy went into enemy territory for his first title defense, and it was no walk in the park. When he beat Charles Oliveira and became the lightweight champion at UFC 280, everyone thought he'd climb up the rankings, and he did. But Alex is still ahead of him, and Makhachev isn't bothered by it. He never really expected fairness from the rankings anyway, and knows how things work for fighters like him. But regardless, he's proud of his journey. He flew thousands of kilometers, defeated a local champion, flew back home with his head held high, with that belt around his waist. That's what matters to him. And the most interesting part is that Makhachev wasted no time in calling out Volkanovski right after winning the lightweight title. He wants to face him in Australia, in his own backyard, and the rematch might just happen after all. There's so much noise and discussion around the result, it's hard to ignore it. But Dana White ended Volkanovski's dreams of an immediate rematch with Islam. The fans, Volkanovski, and even Islam himself have been itching for the rematch, but it looks like Dana has other plans. He's all about playing matchmaker, and he thinks Volkanovski needs to deal with his interim featherweight rival, Yair Rodriguez, before getting another crack at Islam. Dana couldn't help but gush about the first fight between the two, since it was so close, and if that wasn't enough, Yair put on a show of his own by dominating Josh Emmett that same night. So now we've got Yair versus Volkanovski on the horizon, and according to Dana, the next step is for Makhachev to defend his belt against someone else, and then the rematches can happen. Timing, injuries, and personal stuff all come into play when making fights, but in the meantime, let's focus on Yair versus Volkanovski. And once both champions have done their thing, we can start dreaming about that rematch. Who knows what surprises the UFC has in store for us? So there you have it, fight fans. From the controversial aftermath and the quest for a rematch to the insane clash at UFC 284 that had everyone on the edge of their seats, that's why Alexander Volkanovski called out Islam.